Hey, so I thought for a change of pace, I would share with you this kind of secret project that I've been working on. Ever since I kind of saw a planted shrimp tank in a hairdresser many, many years ago, I've been really attached to the idea of keeping my own aquarium and keeping little red cherry shrimp or red crystal shrimp in them. And if you've never seen them, go and Google them right now on YouTube, and you'll be watching. Well, if you find them as adorable as I do, then you'll be watching hours and hours of like shrimp videos. There's a really cool video that I'll link in the description. I've always been put off the prospect of actually doing it though, because whenever I've done any reading, I read it and I find out, hey, you need to do a lot of maintenance, you need to do a lot of water changes, a lot of things to consider, and they're quite sensitive to environmental factors. So I basically put off the whole idea because I don't want to go on holiday and then come back and find out, oh, they've all died due to some fluctuation in temperature or water ammonia level or something like that. Well, after my kind of, and I guess during my trip to Hong Kong and looking at all the aquarium shops and stuff like that, I had that passion reignited. And this time around, I stumbled upon the subreddit r Jarrariums, and also and I learned about this thing called the Wolstad method for keeping a tank, and that's from Diana Wolstad, who's a scientist who actually wrote a great book, and I'll link that in the description, about the ecology of keeping an aquarium, and in particular keeping an aquarium with lots and lots of plants. Because if you can keep an aquarium with a lot of plants, then the plants will accomplish some of the maintenance tasks for you. They will, stabilize ammonia and nitrate levels, and they will kind of encourage you want to be able to encourage the cycle of bacteria and plant growth and that kind of thing in your aquarium, and then you don't have to do so many water changes, blah, 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 blah. So it's more of a kind of low-tech way of keeping a tank, so that you don't have to do fancy things like carbon dioxide injection and that sort of thing. So, whole bunch of reading, whole bunch of research later, I decided that I would start with a very small 1 gallon or 3.5 liter jarrarium. And there I would learn about growing plants and learn about the nitrate cycle and learn about whether or not I can actually maintain a tank this way in the conditions in my home before I go ahead and buy the big aquarium and all that kind of thing. Now, obviously, when you keep a smaller tank, it's actually much more sensitive because any small changes, anything that goes wrong will dramatically, because it's such a small volume of water, will have a huge impact on the actual overall levels of water in the overall kind of composition of the water inside the tank. So I am thinking of this as a kind of challenge, in the same way that with photography, I found that it's when you have a prime lens, it's when you start with a fixed lens that you have these restrictions and you have to work around them. That's when you actually are forced to learn and do research and to work out what will make something work. And from that basis, to learn about how, the whole kind of aquarium ecosystem works. Anyway, so I'll show you the tank right now because it's just sitting there, and I'm going to flip the camera around. And if you are watching this live, please forgive me for sort of inducing motion sickness in you, possibly. So this is actually going out to my Patreon subscribers live. So this is my Jarrarium. It's a like an all IKEA setup. We got this IKEA 3.5 liter Cinelig jar, and then we've got this IKEA lamp that's providing lighting. And I'll go through a little bit about what's going on here. So what I'm doing here is, it's called the dry start method, and it's when you start the tank without water first to allow particular types of plants. And you can see here I've got the plant along the bottom, if you can kind of see it through the mist. That is a kind of carpet plant called HC. I forget the full scientific name. It's also called Cuba. It's apparently quite a popular aquarium plant. And then we've got at the back this kind of grassy looking stuff here. That's called hair grass. And those are carpet plants, and they can grow and cover this entire substrate. But if you kind of start with water and then you try to plant these plants, very often what will happen is that you'll get a whole bunch of algae growing inside the water, and it will compete for carbon dioxide and nutrients with these plants, and then these plants won't get established and they'll just die, and they're relatively expensive, like they were $9 each for 2 pots. So instead of doing that, if you start it dry, then the plants will get unlimited access to CO2 through gas exchange with the atmosphere, and they won't have to compete with algae because there's no water for the algae to grow in. And so you grow it in very high humidity conditions, and so you can see I've sealed it up. We've got just about an inch of water here right under the substrate, and the humidity in this is about 100%. It's like a little mini greenhouse. And so then you can hopefully get a nice carpet. Now this entire process will take about 7 to 8 weeks apparently for this carpet to form. But the nice thing is, none of my other hobbies require so much patience. So it is actually an interesting change of pace for me to actually just watch this grow slowly. And once that's all kind of carpeted, all the bacteria inside the substrate layer will actually have established a nice kind of cycle. Now, it actually didn't take too long to set up this tank, and the whole kind of look of this tank, I've been put a rock in the middle, and the idea of the rock is if you do a bit of a Google of something called the Iwagumi kind of setup for tanks, it's almost like bonsai, but for planted aquariums. You have a big stone and then lots of tiny plants, and then that stone ends up looking almost like a mountain. You might have a few of them, and you lots of little kind of small substrate particles, and it gives an impression of something like a seascape or something much larger than it actually is, which is kind of cool. So the way this tank works is that right now it's sitting on top of a little mini heater that's originally for reptile jars. I'll just move that lamp out of the way so you can see what's going on. And I'll show you a quick video of kind of setup, but there you go. It's sitting on top of this mini heater that's originally for reptile jars, and I took the lid of the tank made a cutout so that it can sit flat. So that provides just a little bit of heat. Right now it's probably a little bit too much heat because of the small quantity of water here, but it's just to provide just a little bit of heat to hopefully generate convection currents, because as you can see, I don't have a filter in the tank itself. I don't have a heater inside the tank, and I didn't want to put a heater under the substrate or into the tank, because if it fails and I have to take the heater out, it's just going to mess up the entire thing. So I want the heater underneath, and hopefully it'll generate like a lava lamp, kind of convection current, so water will rise. There'll be a water column, it'll rise through the substrate, which will help sort of aerate it. It'll rise through the substrate and bring nutrients and kind of flow, and it'll be healthy overall. And then I chose the Wallstad method, or Diana Wallstad actually recommends using soil. And soil, like just kind of organic potting mix. And I've actually gone with ADA Amazonia, kind of a baked soil with almost like a fertilizer. And it's not exactly the same thing because it's sort of an artificial, made in Japan, kind of specific to aquariums. Only really because I think it looks cool, and also because I didn't want a separate trip to the nursery. So the next steps are, I'm going to wait until this carpets, and then I'm going to fill this all with water. And then once you fill it with water, I'm going to see if I can get a nitrate cycle established in it. So the nitrate cycle is ammonia from decomposing plant matter breaks down into nitrite or something. There's a whole cycle and blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm not a biochemist, but apparently there's something very important, and you need to be able to maintain that cycle. Otherwise, everything in the plant will die. Rather, everything in the tank will die. So right before that, I'm going to add a bunch more plants around the edges Right now, there's plants that I can't add now because they can't grow in the air like the way these plants are growing. And so hopefully I'm going to have a really highly densely planted tank. It'll be able to produce enough oxygen and generate enough water filtration that I can then put some trumpet snails in, Malaysian trumpet snails, which apparently are regarded as a pest. They were a bit confused at the aquarium when I suggested that I kind of wanted to take some of those home. They're going to burrow into the substrate and keep it sort of aerated, because otherwise the substrate starts to become anaerobic and it starts to basically rot, and then you get bubbles of ammonia which will apparently burst out and go into the water column, and then ammonia is incredibly toxic to the fish, so they all die. So you want something to go through the substrate and kind of help prevent that buildup of gas. And then if all goes well, and if that's all working well, stabilized, then I might put a few shrimp in it. That's only if I can get it working well. If I can't, I'm not going to do that because they'll die and it's not going to be very nice for them. Anyway, that's the whole kind of setup for this tank. I had to do a great deal of reading about it, but there's actually a pretty simple PDF that goes through the basics of what I'm doing here, and I'll link that in the description. So hopefully I will be able to report back to you in a given amount of time about what's going on with the tank, and we'll see a lovely little shrimp colony in about two or 3 months time here. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Next week we'll probably do the Etymotic ER4R XR review. We didn't actually do that this week because I was a little sick, so I couldn't prepare for it. So hopefully this has been an interesting change of pace for you. Okay, see ya.